Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a very warm welcome to today's very special edition of Hard Talk. I'm Nik Willets, CEO of TM Forum, and today we're going to be discussing one of the toughest issues to crack in our industry, and that is, of course, software and the future of software to support future growth of the industry. Now, service providers are increasingly feeling the pressure of legacy technology in terms of impact on operating cost, time to market, and customer experience. And this is no longer just an internal issue or a financial issue. It's one that is very much present in the boardrooms and conscious of board members of operators all around the world. We have some very exciting news to share with you today in terms of progress in addressing some of these challenges and a truly expert panel to lend their opinions on what needs to change, how we're going to make it happen, and why now is the time for this change to occur. So I'm delighted to welcome today Thierry Souche, Group CIO at Orange, Brendan O'Rourke, Expert Vice President at Bain & Co, and TM Forum's very own CTO, George Glass. Gentlemen, welcome to the call.
Thank you.
I'm also delighted to welcome, of course, Cindy Cain, our audience moderator for today. And those of you who've joined Hard Talks before will know this is very much a session for audience interaction. So we do hope you'll participate through the chat. Cindy will be moderating that through today and throwing questions in as they come up from the audience. And of course, you can also interact with each other using that feature. So Cindy, welcome to the session.
Thanks, guys.
So we're going to dive straight in. I think the first and most important question to ask is, what problem exactly are we fixing? I've just described there that this is not necessarily a new problem. So Thierry, let me come to you first. What is it you think that really needs to change when it comes to OSS and BSS software in our industry?
Well, first, good morning, good evening, good whatever the time for you guys all around the world. I think as CSPs go under pressure with more and more need to go fast to the market with innovation, what we face as an issue is that our IT stack did not evolve at the same speed, at the same pace as the market requirements. And we now face a situation where we keep doing IT the same good old way, while the market is expecting something quite different. They expect something which goes fast onto the market, where we could try a lot of things, see very, very speculative ideas being put in the hands of the customer and understand whether that makes business, whether there is attraction or not. While the way we do IT is pretty legacy way of doing things, which is we take a whole stack, we take months and months and months to identify the one which is the one we would want to do. We put millions of dollars on the table and we buy it. And then we put millions of dollars on the table to integrate it. And then it takes another year before you ever get anything on the market. And it's a pretty well understood, well mastered way of doing things within the teams, in the operators, but also with our partners, the solution vendors. But at the same time, it's simply not what the business needs right now. So we actually need to be able to go much, much faster. We need to be able to focus much less money on what works and does the job, much more money on innovative things, on data, on analytics, on understanding and serving better the customers. So that shift of money and that time pressure we need to apply on the whole process is simply not compatible with the way we do things today. And that's why we had such debates and a lot of work with the TM Forum in order to reinvent the way we do IT.
Thanks, Thierry. Now, let me come to you, Brendan. Brendan, you're a seasoned CIO before stepping into your role at Bain. You're now working with CIOs and executives all around the world. Does it resonate with you? And what scope of the problem and how quickly do we need to fix that problem, do you feel?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Yeah, Nick, I think that when we look at the industry and the challenges, and you summarised some of those on the way in, you know, the customer expectations around experience, ease of use, the fact that we have to reinvent our core business actually and move away from just the current business models as we see the trends driven by 5G, FMC, network softwareization, and the fact that actually our core margins and revenues are declining as an industry, I think we need to change very, very rapidly. The competition is coming, And I think we need to see this shift that Thierry talked about of where we invest within the next 3 to 5 years. If the service providers are going to partake in the new revenue streams generated in this dynamic market.
Now, you say 3 to 5 years. Is that a view that's changed in the current situation with COVID? We've seen a lot of people, and indeed on Hard Talk previously, who talked about the acceleration of digitization. So do you think the pressure's staying the same when it comes to IT transformation, or is it subject to the same forces as a lot of other parts of the business?
So I think the forces are there. They were there before COVID. What I think we've seen in COVID from an industry perspective is a sort of stopping of trading. I mean, and if you talk to many in the industry, new accounts, churn has basically stopped, handset sales have declined rapidly. But on the flip side, we've seen this shift to digital, people more willing to transact on the digital systems and looking for that very simple, easy experience. And actually the opportunity potentially now to embed some of that shift to digital in your ways of operating and not necessarily just restart all the call centers, reopen all your retail stores, go back to how you behaved before. The opportunity is to really take this and embed it in your future business by accelerating that investment in the digitalization of the IT.
Thanks, Brendan. Now, George, let me come to you. This concept of overhauling IT, transforming OSS, BSS, plug-and-play software, let's be honest, they're not really new. The industry's been talking about this for some time. So what do you think is changing now that means that the problems that Brendan and Thierry have described so well can actually start to be addressed?
So I think the approach that we're taking with ODA and our modular component-based architecture that exposes its business functionality via a set of open APIs is that within the TM forum here, we're actually creating machine readable assets, downloadable APIs, downloadable components that actually get you up and running very, very quickly. And these components have been developed by our members right across the industry with representatives from both the CSP and operator communities, the systems integrator communities, and the vendor communities. And our objective has always been to get that minimum viable product, that working code out there as quickly as possible. And I would describe it almost as like an internet style of collaboration where we work collectively to get something that works. And then once it's working, we refine it and improve it. But the concept that we've got within ODA is that it's modular and componentized. So you don't have to change the whole thing at once. You can change bits of it to address the very business problem that Thierry talked about, which is to allow particularly the CSPs to invest in innovative change as opposed to rebuilding something that they already have and is probably functioning perfectly adequately today.
So thanks for that, George. Thierry, let me come to you. I mean, this concept of standardization also isn't new. It's at the heart very much of how the network side of operators have worked for many years. And I've spoken to many CTIOs who've come from the network side into IT and said, why can't we just do what we do in the network? Is it as simple as that, or is it a different kind of standardization you think that's needed?
I think it's somehow inspired by what was achieved in the network side, but also learning from a lot of things which were achieved as well on the IT side. So it's not just a straight replica. First, when you look at networks and you would think that networks are standardized, well, that's very true on the mobile side. But for whoever has been operating in a fixed, which were actually operating way before standards were emerging so strongly, then you will realize that there are not two fixed operations who are really set the same. And when you do implement and integrate services on top of a fixed network in two different countries, you discover two very different playing fields. IT is actually a little bit of a different beast because we are much, much more adherent to the business. And there is no two business alike when you take two different countries. The markets are different, the competition is different, the pace, the price points, everything is very different, not even speaking about regulatory obligations and things like that, right? So the ambition is actually bolder when you consider IT because you have to somehow find the level which needs to be achieved in terms of standardization, or more even interoperability, because you want to make a lot of room for maneuver so that the business would not feel squeezed in a jail and would actually have all the room to go to the market with a lot of agility. And that brings a different set of concepts. We learned a lot as an industry, and TM Forum was really instrumental in helping open APIs to emerge. And actually, when, for instance, within Orange, we do leverage on the open APIs across our footprint to deliver a lot of services, we learned both what the APIs bring and what they do not bring. And a lot of things are related to the way you do translate the business processes into the stack, or the way you actually structure your catalogs, which will not come through an API. So it's a conjunction of data model, how do you structure a data model, catalogs, how do you do a lot of discipline work on the catalogs, APIs, and around all of that, you wrap a little thing of interoperability, and then you get ODA. So it's actually somehow a step further beyond what network had to achieve, because we do have to stick to the business, and the business is simply much more diverse and fast-moving than whatever we will see ever on the network.
So it's standardization, but not as we know it, from what you're saying there, Thierry, and it's a different form of standardization. Now, let's just play that out from a business standpoint. If you're a CFO or a CEO, you've got a couple of pressures when it comes to any kind of IT transformation. One is the quarter-to-quarter pressures. You mentioned that COVID has given a much needed relief in terms of the swapping of customers between operators and some of the churn challenges. But there's pressures to constantly innovate and evolve those products to stay competitive. That's at odds with a longer term IT strategy, or it can be. And if you're a CFO, you've probably seen a number of these IT projects before that haven't gone so well, these big bang transformations and so on. So maybe Brendan and Thierry, for you, what's different now? If you were perhaps a skeptical CFO listening to this saying, here we go again, what would be different this time that makes this a more pragmatic or more realistic approach?
So let me take it, and then Thierry, you build on it. So I think that so we've when you're talking to the CFO and you look at the past, and you're right, these big bang projects with lots of investment, as George says, they haven't necessarily led to innovation in the business or the ability to adapt to the market more quickly. When we look at what we're developing under the ODA and the component architecture and the ability, as George said, to actually deliver it in chunks, so smaller releases over time, delivering new agile functionality based on that componentization, the standardization, actually not just the standardization within the telco industry, but actually basing it on IT standards, such as when we talk about the open canvas and using standard architectures like Kubernetes, etc. It provides us actually a very low-cost way of introducing innovation into the business. And I think from a CFO perspective, presenting this in that way as essentially a set of small, low-cost phases to drive innovation, giving the ability to prove value early. So when I talk to lots of businesses now and about what they want to do in digital transformation, there is a little bit of fatigue, of large digital change programs, depending on millions of pounds of investment into IT. And what we need to use this architecture is to explain to the CEOs and the CFOs that actually the right way is to deliver it in small steps, delivering value at a pace, but in individual steps that allows you to test whether it's being successful or not as you go along. And I think that's fundamental. And of course, that's how, and we'll talk about this, Nik, that has a massive impact on the software market for the CSPs and how CSPs deploy software as well into their organization.
I would say additionally to that the crisis demonstrated how critical it is to accelerate on the digital side. And that's obvious to all businesses, not just for telcos. But that brought, if I take the example of Orange, a specific focus when you have to go full digital on multi-services and not just on telco. And that forces you to have a very clean architecture to do so, and to do so in a right way as seen from the end user perspective. Because it really enforces us to go clean on the identity management, on the person-centric management, on the ability to have catalogs which span across multiple service verticals and things like that. So there was a kind of revelation with this COVID crisis and the fact that customers had to interact with 100% digital interaction with us. It revealed where there was a flow in some architectures, in some countries and operations, but it also helped us put value on it and say, okay, if you do this type of transformation, what is the gain? Because if you finally decide that you will go for X% of pure digital interaction to X plus 50%, that has a real impact on the P&L, which helps funding a lot of things. But at the same time, we tell them, no, we don't want multi-million dollars projects. We want to go with a business, iterative, leveraging on assets which are there as much as we can, and leveraging on standards. And that suddenly resonates differently to them, because suddenly we talk the way they were used to see the network guys talking to them, feature per feature sometimes, looking really at incremental investments and value for each and every incremental investment. Now, saying so, it is a very deep transformation, not just on how you would attack the IT itself, but how you, as an operator, but also as a vendor, you work around that. Because as a matter of fact, it challenges the way of working around RFPs, it changes the way of working around the infrastructure, changes the way of working together with the business. So it's a real 360 transformation that we need to address. So when you go for such a challenge, as Brendan says, you'd better go for small steps, demonstrate the value, gate the buy-in, and launch.
And for you, Thierry, in a company like Orange, that sounds like quite a different conversation than you might have been having in the past. For starters, you're talking about an architecture with business people. That's probably something you would have tried to shy away from in the past. So how much are you able to leverage these concepts into that business conversation and be able to rely on something like an industry agreed open digital architecture to facilitate that?
So I would say before crisis, we had a very, very heavy work at getting the business side to understand ODA, to understand the value for them, etc. We had a lot of discussions with CEOs for them to understand that it's not an IT question, it's a business question. And by the way, you had an Orange CEO in a previous ARC talk, so it's just demonstrating that as a culture change, ODA is a catalyst towards getting the business understanding that IT is their thing and not the thing for the clumsy IT boys somewhere in the background. That's one. Second, it's also a question of getting quantified value on everything we do. And very interestingly, we get a very different discussion than we had 1 year ago when we look at the strategic plan, etc. within Orange. They're actually not anymore so much looking at how can I reduce year on year, every year, since the last 15 years, the yearly IT investment. And they say, okay, if I were to put more, where should I invest and how much could I get out? In a much more business-oriented way, in a much more down-to-earth value creation, case-by-case analysis. And that is something which is quite refreshing. So it's also a way to place IT back in the value chain and not anymore as a, let's say, commoditized cost view, but at the cost of a big transformation in how we do things.
I think also, Nik, it's interesting that just to make a build on that when, some time ago, telco businesses would look at the Amazons or the Googles of this world and say, why can't we build technology like that? Why can't we be that fast and innovative? And then we kind of moved on and said, well, we're not really hyperscalers. We're a different kind of business. That's fair. But now I see that, telco IT has lost the technology leadership I think it had. And actually, I look at not just retail banking, but CPG, retail companies that are really accelerating their innovation in IT to respond to the market pressures. And so we're talking to CIOs and CFOs, they're even looking at retail markets and saying, look, people are responding to Amazon very quickly, leveraging IT to be dynamic in their own market. And we, telcos, seem to be falling behind. How do we invest in IT, as Thierry said, in the right things, not just the re-engineering, replace the billing system, but actually become innovative in data, in AI, in automation, in customer experience. How do we make those investments and start to take technology leadership again to help in our, in this very dynamic market they're facing?
I think that's a very interesting point, Brendan. How, if you had to quantify that and said to the average telco, look, you're X years behind the curve now, where in the past you might consider yourself at the bleeding edge, what kind of number, how much catching up is there to do?
Well, I think, we include a good stat in the paper, which is, by 2025, Gartner's predicting that telcos will be spending more than 40% of their entire IT budget just maintaining their legacy architecture. Okay, and if we continue on the current trajectory, and then that points to what Thierry said at the beginning, once you're doing that, where's your money for transformation, for innovation? It's just disappearing. I would think that, when I see companies, and I'm working not just in telco, I work across CPG and retail as well, they started this journey maybe 3 or 4 years ago, actually. Microservices architecture, APIs, customer driven, they're all at different journeys, but I think that the telco industry, from what I've seen, I mean, there are some exceptions. Yeah, I see, obviously we've got Geo, we've got Rakuten. I've seen great things at Vodafone, for example, and I know at Orange and Telefonica there's progress being made. But I also think we're probably 3 to 5, definitely 3 years behind in really strong thinking about how we move to that kind of architecture in a standard way across the industry. And the ODA has been doing great things in the last 12 months, I think, to accelerate that thinking and drive it into the industry. And I think that's really good.
Now, you mentioned there, Brendan, the new white paper that TM4 is publishing today. That's a white paper that's been contributed to by all of you and many other companies to try and set this vision and time horizon and some of the things that need to change. George and Brendan, you were two of the co-editors of that paper with a lot of input. Just summarize for the audience briefly, if you don't mind, some of the key takeaways and maybe even some of the aha moments for you in pulling that, what we hope is a clear vision for the industry in terms of transformation of OSS and BSS.
Yeah, let me kick off. I think it's to do with the modular nature of the open digital architecture and the exposure of those business capabilities via open APIs. Increasingly, we've been advocating the documentation and the publication of our assets as machine readable assets so that somebody can actually take those and use them immediately. And we've been seeing the patterns from the architecture which exposes those business capabilities via open APIs being adopted by both the vendors and the CSPs within their architecture. That then creates the opportunity for vendors to build those components because they're compliant with the industry standards and make those available in a way that's easy for the operators and their teams to consume those components and integrate them into their architecture. Now, as Brendan said, it actually is changing the nature of the IT capability of the operator because the components and the APIs are designed to be industry standard, but they're also designed to be extendable. And that's where you build the innovation into the component. But that's actually meaning that the operators are probably starting to hire new coders who are going to actually build that innovation into the component, but still compliant with the interconnection points in the architecture. So you don't get obsolescence, you don't get this mass customization that we saw with large packages previously because of the smaller nature of the building blocks that we're working with in ODA. And that then means that you spend your money, you make your investments where you want that differentiation in the market. But it also means that innovative new players can enter that market by making their assets available in a marketplace where those components, those APIs, those services and microservices would be downloadable and can be integrated directly into your development pipeline.
Yeah, and I think, just to add that, but the two things that have come out for me from the work and in the paper that are really important. One is that this movement, the open API movement has been incredibly successful in adoption, and it's made it easier to integrate packages, but it hasn't driven innovation in the software market. as much as we would have liked over the last 10 years. And I think when I see what we're doing on the Open Digital Framework, just moving to that lower level of component and standardizing, not just in a telco standard, but actually leveraging standard, new web API architectures, tool chains to automate and integrate and deploy new applications, making it really easy to produce those solutions. I think the paper provides a pathway for telcos to take to the new architecture to drive innovation. And we talked about this a lot when we were writing the paper. It's okay to say what it is. In fact, that's quite easy. But to say how you do it is really hard. And I think the paper really gives some real good signposts and directions and clues on how to do it, which we will now build on in Catalyst and developing that over the next few years. So the how bit is really important, and it's in there, and there are people doing it today. And that's just a great takeaway for me.
Thierry, do you want to add anything to that? You've very much been one of the inspirations for a lot of the thoughts in the paper. So keen to hear your thoughts on have we now got a clear vision? Have we got a pragmatic pathway, as Brendan describes it?
I think highlighting on Brendan's message, one of the key things we achieved moving from, let's say, only open APIs to ODA is really trying to get a system view on it and trying to understand how that would materialize for an operator in a tangible way, right? When I look at Orange, again, we're operating in multiple countries, and some of the services are very local, but some of the services are completely the same everywhere, and we do deliver them at scale. Now, without ODA, you would have to go for a pretty clumsy implementation of the whole thing you need to do, from the first piece of hardware to the whole level of integration into the local operations. And you take a lot of time on the how, not only on the what, right? What we try to achieve is putting a lot of that learning curve and return of experience into the thinking of ODA and saying, okay, how do we do it zero touch? How can we go the normal way, normal being the normal way which is dictated by the GAFAs and the best practices, and the fact that they do operate that way is not just a pure coincidence. They do it that way because it's efficient, it goes at scale, it enables to go fast. So we translated a lot of our own return of experience, a lot of inspiration coming from actually the best SAST players in the world, and put that into ODA. So it's cloud native, not because we like it, but because it's the only way to go fast and to go really infrastructure agnostic. It's CI/CD because that's the only way to operate at scale, and that you can integrate that as a service piece into some kind of other operations. It's really modular because we know that there is not one size fits all, and I see it every day in Orange, meaning very, very small operations, very large operations, you don't do the same thing the same way. But some of the basic things are required the same way everywhere. So modular, cloud native, fast to slot in, fast to slot out, enable the try thing, enable the operations to actually have their view on, yeah, I take it, I don't take it. Helps me go faster. Go really in a way that you reopen completely the ways of working, and you actually implement the agile way in operations and not just on the paper.
Thanks, Thierry. Well, I can see the chat's going pretty bonkers at the moment. Cindy's been kept very busy moderating that. We are going to come to a lot of your questions a little bit later in today's session, so please do keep those questions coming. Now, I just want to pick up on something you were mentioning there, Thierry, and that Brendan and George also talked about, which is a sense of momentum around ODA within companies, but also in the industry. And one of the things the TM Forum has done to try and measure that is we created a manifesto that companies sign up to when they basically are ready to commit to that future. And we're very pleased today to announce 11 new signatories, some very big brands as part of those signatories, bringing us up to 30 companies in total. We're also today sharing the results of our latest 6-monthly adoption report on open APIs. There's a 34% increase in the number of companies reporting adoption. There's also a 9% increase in terms of people's plans and intent on open API adoption, 7% maturity. That's just in 6 months. So our perception is this is moving pretty fast. I think my question back to all of you on the panel is, What do you think's causing that speed? We talked a bit earlier in the call about some of the pressures on the market, some of the realizations, but there might be some people out there saying, well, okay, there's been attempts like this before, do they really have an impact? Will it really work? We're starting to see that momentum building. So Thierry, let me come back to you first. Do you think this is now gathering the momentum it needs to really change what is a fragmented global industry?
Yeah, I think there was somehow a moment, a bit of this mystery thing. 6 months ago, we were quite numerous among CSPs to really push on the manifesto, on ODA, trying to really gather the industry around an objective, which is, let's survive, guys. Let's still have a future. Let's still have value in the business tomorrow. And it was a little bit difficult because I think quite a lot of solution providers were somehow squeezed in between reinventing themselves for a better future, but at the same time cannibalizing their existing line of product without so much of a view of how that would develop for them, right, in terms of their ability to do the business. And I think we worked all together, and we now have a very balanced momentum with a lot of CSPs, and I think quite very convinced, large-scale CSPs pushing hard to get the things done, but also the top solution providers joined the initiative because we, I think, found a way to make it a balanced business for them, an actually true opportunity for them to really go for the next step value, but also probably an acknowledgement that over the last 10 years, that there was kind of a consolidation across the industry, and that would not be good because actually it's reducing innovation, reducing ability to attract talents, attract brand new stuff, which would really make the wow effect with our customers and reduce the telcos' revenues and attractivity. Mm-hmm. And I think they understood that they need their core customers to still be healthy tomorrow, to still have a lot of revenues coming from wild innovation, from data, from AI, and not just from doing the good old thing like building a SIM, because that would be a commodity. So we got to the point now where we have a extremely rich, extremely balanced adhesion to the manifesto and to ODA. So I think we've got this moment of grace that we need to enjoy, but now hard work is ahead, right? We need to deliver.
Indeed. And there's 4 new service providers who've been announced today as signing: BT, Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica and Telenor, joining the likes of Orange and Vodafone and many others who've already signed. We caught up a little earlier with Enrique Blanco, who's the group CTIO at Telefonica. And Enrique was one of the people probably 18 months ago saying to me, look, I've spent a lot of my career on the network side. We've managed to get to this sort of level of plug and play and feature-rich capability, as you described earlier, Thierry. So we have a short clip from that session with Enrique just to share with you now. If we could play that, please.
Investing billions in FTTH, investing billions in 4G plus, 5G, and you are not building this architecture. So you are building an extraordinary machine that it is very difficult to manage. And every time you need to evolve, you need to stop the machine and you need to build a new black box. So managing. So this open architecture, this open digital architecture, they are the pillars helping us trying to be so agile in how we manage the systems and how we manage the commercial system and how we manage the network itself.
So we had Enrique there really talking about the billions that go into the network, and what I took away from what he was describing was this is a little bit like, building a fantastic chassis for a car and putting all this money into this fantastic design, but then you put an engine that's just in no way powerful enough to really get that value out of it. And I think that's what we're seeing, what we're hearing even from this panel in terms of, look, there's so much money going into 5G, so much money going into the network. And yet if we're building extra black boxes or duplication every time in order to monetize that investment and in order to manage that investment, can we really get the value out? So, Brendan, what's your reaction to that? Do you think that's the right line of thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the IT layer is how you expose the capability of the network to the customer. It's fundamental in achieving the customer experience that our customers expect and the new revenue streams that we want to drive. So the ODA for me is a way, we've talked about, I talked about how other industries are moving to that type of architecture. And I think that this movement is critical to expose all of the new network functionality that's coming. And I would say, George talked about the innovation in the network in the last 3 to 5 years has been amazing. Yeah, in the software, the new innovative companies that have come in, I've seen a lot of new entrants be successful. And I think the ODA framework gives us the opportunity to have that type of innovation, give new companies a view to how they can make money in the IT architecture of the telco, but also give new roles and capabilities to existing service providers. So as Thierry said, actually, what we have a really balanced view of the market that we've done through the ODF, and I think it gives opportunities to existing players, but really allows for that innovative new entrants to come into the market.
George, you're working with an awful lot of different TM Forum members who are at different stages of this journey, and I'm sure you spend a lot of your time encountering different questions and different thoughts on how this can be done. So, for you, do you see the momentum building? Thierry talked about it, sort of a nice moment perhaps for us to enjoy now in terms of that it feels like that momentum is building, but I know your mind's already on what's next. So, give us a flavour of what are the challenges that still lay ahead in this journey.
So I think Brendan is starting to unlock some of the challenges that I'm seeing coming down the line. And that's, we've had the launch of 5G. We've seen the transformation in the network space. But as part of ODA, we like to think of everything as a service. We encapsulate the business capability and we expose it as an API, a software component that can be integrated into the architecture. And what I'm wanting to do is to take that transformation into the network space to make the management of the network much simpler, to make it automated, and then to allow the telcos, and this is the holy grail of what we're trying to do with ODA, is not only to just deliver digital efficiency into the telco space, but actually create that opportunity for you to move into the new innovative markets that are going to be unlocked by the technologies of 5G. And it's really important that we actually encapsulate that as a set of IT services and manage that as a set of IT services, because in fact, actually the network is becoming one of our biggest IT platforms in the architecture, and the agility that we need then to be able to deliver not only connectivity as a service, but other services on top of that to actually exploit the capabilities, the low latency, the ultra high density that's available from things like the 5G networks, and actually offer innovative new services that create the opportunity for revenue growth in the telco space is where we're actually thinking that ODA is going to go next. And the concept of things like self-optimizing, self-healing domains in the network so that it's always there, it's always working from the customer's perspective, is giving me enough challenges to keep me going for the next 6 months before we get the challenges from Thierry and the other members of our advisory boards that are driving us forward with the technology transformation of ODA.
Thanks, George. Now, everybody on the panel's talked a little bit about the impact on the vendor space and the opportunity that we need more innovation, more fresh blood perhaps coming in there as well. But there's no hiding the fact that if you look across the world, there's hundreds or even thousands of service providers whose operations are underpinned by incumbent capabilities, and it would be unfair to a lot of those incumbent vendors who are reinventing their stacks. And one of the other things we're really pleased to share today is that for the first time, we see some very major vendor and supplier brands starting to support open digital architecture. So Amdocs, Netcracker, Nokia, and Oracle are the four big additional signatories from the software supplier side of the house who've signed and we're announcing today. We caught up a little earlier with Jason Rutherford from Oracle, who just gave us a short view on Oracle's reasons for signing this manifesto. So if we could play that, please.
If you follow Oracle, you know that we're all about open integration and following standards wherever possible. And so the ODA is really second nature to that. That is what it's all about. it's good for Oracle, and it's good for our customers, because we know that it will ease integration for our customers and might make life easier for them.
And we also caught up with Bhaskar Gorti, who's president of Nokia Software. So let's also just briefly hear from Bhaskar, and then we can hear from the panel.
In terms of the open digital architecture, it's very simple. It's important to our customers. Our customers are very clearly interested in having multi-network, multi-vendor solutions. So therefore, we are aligning our interests along with our customers' choice and value. And also, the other thing that our customers are looking for from open digital architecture is the velocity with which they can tap into innovation from the community at large. And therefore, we are very excited about endorsing the open digital architecture across our entire portfolio.
So strong endorsement there from two of the four, and there's further quotes and comments from all of the vendors in today's press release. Thierry, let me come to you on this. How important is this support from the existing vendors for approaches like open digital architecture?
Well, I think it's simply mandatory if we want to make ODA a success, or even make it just credible in the industry. The point is, we are not an industry where we're just created yesterday. We all have tens of years of operations. We have a lot of legacy stack everywhere in the world. And the business will simply not swipe out this legacy stack just in a whim. We need to make sure that, on the one hand, every penny we spend is valuable to the business. On the other hand, that we secure the operations. So the hell of a challenge we face with ODA is that it actually has to be somehow flexible enough in its very nature that we could just focus on a small bit of the IT stack, replace that bit, make that bit future-proof. From that bit, enable the implementation of whatever use cases a business is interested in, which could be data, analytics, new services, whatever, and live with the rest. Because you know what? We don't have the billions of euros necessary to do just a big swap. And it's no value, actually. So what works should still work, and we will still live with it. The key point for me is, how do I unlock it? How do I make sure that it enables me to go much faster on a full 100% digital experience? How does it allow me to have a much more 360 view or real-time understanding of what is happening to my customers across multiple services? And how do I leverage AI to actually bring more services to them, more value to them, and hopefully a little bit more revenue? So that's the way we sort of ODA, which is not kind of very theoretical approach where, we have a greenfield, we build a brand new operation, nice. But that will never happen almost. So we are very strongly embedded into reality. And the key point here is, how do you justify the one next penny you're going to put into it? And how does that yield back value fast to the business, either because you actually do better on the digital side, or you enable a new service or a new player to come in? And there's one thing that was not mentioned in the panel right now, which is, we are not only telcos. If I only take Orange, and I'm sure there are plenty of telcos doing the same thing, we're going massively multi-service. We sell financial services. We sell energy. We sell smart home. We sell TV and entertainment. We sell a lot of things. How does our IT stack support that in a neutral way? We were saying earlier that the network is probably becoming an IT platform. Well, actually, it is a platform. And there are multiple service platforms. We are actually deploying at scale within Orange mobile finance services platforms. So the key question for me is, how will the same IT leverage on all those platforms, enable a truly customer-centric approach toward this, and make value? And if we don't think that way, if we don't make it service-aware and service-oriented everywhere, we'll never get there.
So if I hear you correctly, Thierry, you're saying, I think, two very important points. One is the pivot in terms of your priorities and companies' priorities as service providers in terms of where they want to spend on IT, not on customization, not on integration, not on duplication, but on genuine differentiators. So it's not a case of we're not going to spend the money, it's where you're going to spend the money. But then what you were describing there, I think, is super important in terms of a growing pie, because just as you see in Orange's strategic plan, and you're right, it's in the plan of many, many others now to say we'll become a multi-service operator. Orange already is one. That expands the market. That expands the opportunity for a lot of the vendor community. So let me just throw it to the whole panel. I mean, do you feel confident that the approach with ODA supports that future? Brendan, you've talked a little bit about working across multiple industries, seeing what's happening now in your role at Bain. Is this the path forward for that multi-service operator of future as well?
Yeah, so I think that one of the big challenges in creating new business models for telcos is the ability to partner seamlessly, easily, quickly, and add these new services into the overall bundle. Often these services are low margin and highly scalable, and so having a massive investment cost has always been a barrier to innovation for telcos to stretch horizontally and add new services, whether adjacent or not. And I think that what the ODA gives you is a simple way of and a modern way of integrating these new services. And what is interesting is in those other markets, in those other industries, they're already moving in a direction. So when we talk about these standards and making it easy to connect, we're really talking about lower level IT standards, almost equivalent to a protocol standard. Not a everybody has to have the same product catalog or everybody has to have the same payment platform. It's actually how you connect the components of that at a kind of protocol level, which is very much like a traditional IT industry set of standards. So what this will allow us to do is be very innovative, because we can link into a lot of other new innovative startups in many industries who are actually deploying the same types of architecture today. And I think the other thing, Nick, for me from the ODA is when you look at the service provider market in terms of the software provision, the opportunity is growing. Our own research at Bain shows that spend is moving to the cloud. We see the growth in SaaS, in these cloud-based microservices architectures within the telco industry growing. And so the opportunity for software vendors and IT service providers is to get a broader range of services. Move into the hosting of the solution, move into the managing of the cloud orchestration, move into the ability to provide solutions based on these architectures to CSPs who maybe today don't have the internal capabilities, but still want to take advantage of ODA type architectures. So it is a very balanced approach. New software vendors will allow us to innovate. Existing software vendors and service providers can add to their service provision and tap into this growth in cloud services marketplace.
Thanks, Brendan. I think we've heard there and summarised nicely the flexibility and pragmatic approach here. George, just come to you before we come to questions from the audience, just on that longer term future for ODA in terms of it supporting many of the new business models, services and multi-service operators.
Yeah, fundamental to ODA is the fact that we've got this interoperability or interconnectivity points in the architecture through the open APIs. And working with the open API team, and I've been part of that team from its inception 5 or 6 years ago, the whole concept was that you designed the API to be independent of the customer segment that it was going to support. It was product and service agnostic, and it was vendor neutral. So you're always trying to think in terms of, if I'm doing a product order, I want to be able to order anything from a simple fixed widget to the most complex telco service to all the parts to build a car. And by actually having the ODA and the APIs designed in that manner, it's almost like the protocol level interface that Brendan talked about, that it enables the APIs to carry any payload, but to remain open in terms of their interconnectivity points. That's the real flexibility of ODA, because that's the thing that allows it to move from the telco space into an adjacent industry, or to start to manage products and services which weren't typically thought of as telco services. So it enables us to help Orange move into the banking sector using many of the same capabilities through the open APIs. But it also enables us to offer services into the automotive industry. Some of it started out as connectivity services, But now we're offering higher level services in terms of location-based services and other things that actually help us in the management and delivery of a customer experience around a new vehicle. And that's the whole power of ODA. It's not just trapped in the telco space. It's designed to move into adjacent industries.
Thanks, George. Well, without further ado, let me just give Thierry a last word, and then we'll come to questions.
Yeah, just maybe insisting on the message from George, because I saw some of the questions on the side, a little bit of skepticism around the ability to actually deliver, which is very healthy challenge that I welcome. I think that the big change I saw personally between APIs, as we saw and we worked at in SID and everything we did in the years before, and the switch to ODA, is the fact that the works were very much on the what until now, and the what only could answer quite a lot of the challenges that the operators would face, but we were still to go into nitty-gritty integration details and implementations and a lot of hard work to put our own how around this what. ODA goes as a full scope initiative. It just delivers to you the way to deliver the infrastructure, the way to condition and do the CI/CD pipe into the infrastructure, and the what goes on top of. So it's much more wide scope. And the purpose is really to answer some of the questions which were on the side panel around, okay, but nice theoretical thing, but how do we put it in operation? And I think ODA brings quite a lot of the answers.
Thanks, Thierry. Well, without further ado, I want to give a little bit of the time we have left to our audience Q&A. Cindy's been kept very busy on the chat. So to the panelists, to just ask if we can, see how many of these we can get through in the remaining minutes of this. So rapid fire question answer. So Cindy, over to you for some of the key questions coming up.
Hi all, thanks so much for all your questions. It's been a great chat. It is a hard talk, so I'm going to start with a hard question. So a lot of people have said that CSPs are all different, our market is different, our customers are different. Are we sure that standards really help in digital transformation? And when you compare CSPs with the Googles and Amazons of the world, they all offer the basis of the same principle and the same services all around the world. I understand that Amazon, Netflix, and now Tesla are all pursuing their own IT as a way to grow it eternally and organically. How do we compare with the Amazon of the world and who are defining their own and unique solutions? So that's kind of a big question that's been coming up.
Maybe I can take the first bit of it, and I'm sure George and Brendan will take over. An interesting experience is being CIO of a very, very diverse group like Orange. And I will just show the extreme of the ranges, where on the one hand we have, for instance, an operation in Central Africa, where the full IT teams counts on potentially 4 hands, to our largest operation in France, where you have thousands of IT experts working on the stack and actually delivering an incredibly rich set of services. So we have, I think, the whole range of possible cases within Orange. And nevertheless, as a CIO, because I'm confronted to so diverse set of investments and cases and markets and requirements coming from the businesses, etc., even though all of that looks so different, there are a few things which are always, always, always the same. And there are things around how you would structure your catalog, which is, anyhow, a very valid question everywhere. How would you expose and manage the customer identity? How would you manage the data around that customer? All of that, meaning, okay, you may define the offer a little bit differently. And there is more or less prepay and postpay. And there is more or less combination of convergent offers, etc. But eventually the basics of IT stay roughly the same. And the difference I saw so far was very much of scale. Of course, you don't have the same number of customers, you don't need the same type of infrastructure, etc. But as you go cloud native, quite a lot of that difference fades away. And I tend to say that having such a set of diverse operations helped us understand what is truly common and what is so specific to the businesses. And there is always a tendency in every operation to think that we are so special. And I've been into operations in countries, so I know how special I was versus whatever the holistic guys in the corporate would think. But at the same time, stepping back, I can tell you that I saw translated into ODA a very nice share of that split between what is truly global, what is really specifically local.
Yeah. Thanks, Thierry. Brendan, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly. So I guess I think about it more in terms of Amazon Marketplace, where there's a checkout component, there's a basket component, there's a product component. I mean, these are all standardized components with standard, everybody who sells on the marketplace has to use the same components in the same way. What they sell is completely different. The terms around what they sell are completely different. How they ship it can be very different. So it's about standardizing how the components fit together. The journey is the same. For everybody who sells on the marketplace, those components fit together in the same way. And then the second thing I would say when we talk about standards, again, we're not talking about everybody deploy the same billing engine or what we're really talking about is how you deploy these components on the production estate. So again, if you look in the paper, I won't go into here, but the technical standardization is more at the kind of protocol level and what fits into a component than telling you what your engine should look like.
Thanks, Brendan. Cindy, let's come back to you for another couple of questions.
Yeah, sure. So the next one I have is, this was an early question actually, is there a need for a new BSS for 5G? Also, is there a need for a new buying experience for customers whilst purchasing 5G services?
I think I'll jump straight into that one. 5G is a product like any other product. It's a network technology. It's a way of providing connectivity. It offers some new features. And actually, one of our innovative Catalyst programs that we ran in Nice last year actually talked about services, not slices. And if people are familiar with 5G, one of the technology capabilities that it uses is this concept of slicing the connection so that you can put multiple connections in parallel. But we're actually thinking of these in ODA terms as services that you offer and business capabilities that you offer. And then you just leverage those business capabilities to deliver a service to your end customer. So the architecture that we've got in ODA is already 5G ready, if you like. So I don't need a new BSS for 5G. You've just got to use the components and use them in the way that actually leverage the capabilities that these new technologies offer into the marketplace.
Actually would jump back on that. I see a very big difference between 5G and 4G, but I see it from a very personal angle. 5 years ago, I had an extensive, tough discussion with the guy in charge of managing standardization works within Orange towards GSMA. And the discussion was, I think you should forget about those documentation explaining me how the protocol works and all of that. Could you please shift to writing an API, the Swagger, and then I will have a reference implementation, and then I will know what to do with it from an IT perspective and a business perspective. And 5 years ago, that was kind of deaf dialogue. We simply could not understand each other because the guys didn't have a true gut feel of what an API was and how that would actually reflect into the network operation. So nowadays, we've passed that point, meaning 5G is just a set of APIs. My big problem is not 5G. My problem is 4G and 3G because they are not. And I just cannot yet consume them as services, which I would love to. So I think 5G is great in the way that it will actually bring a much more unified view of things between the guys on the business and the guys on the network. At the same time, there's a hell way to go to actually make it consumable exactly the way we want. But that's the kind of next challenge.
Okay, we're going to just take one last question, and so back to Cindy.
Well, I'm going to be cheeky on behalf of the audience and bolt two together. So Pranjal asks, how easy is it for ISPs, network operators, to migrate to microservices architecture? And in the same line, there are people saying that there's reluctance to move to OSS fully to the cloud. How do you propose overcoming the reluctance of that?
Okay, so can I start? So I'll take the first one. So I think that when we talk about migration to new architectures, obviously it's more than just technology. So you have to think about the customer transition, the business transition, ways of working changes, etc. So there's never one answer to that. There's a bespoke plan that needs to be built for each business about how they will do that. What we would recommend in Bain is that we start with a vision of that future architecture. So understand where you want to be at the end. And then think about the transition in terms of not necessarily IT components, right? So think about it in terms of maybe user journeys. So maybe we move a journey, maybe we move I buy first, maybe we move I get help first. But each time we take a journey and move it, and we iterate in small increments over a period of time, building the minimal viable product components that you need to support that journey, always having the ability to move back and forth between the existing architecture and the new one to de-risk that. And then over time, you progress towards your vision at a pace which suits the business. So both the people change, the organizational change, the customer experience change, and a pace that IT can just iterate through. And remember, when we started this conversation with how do you sell it to the CFOs? Here we are, small investments built around customer experience, delivering value in small increments, and the business changes at the pace that it can change at. And I think that's critical. That's the critical success factor for me.
Okay.
I would add that the human factor is everything, right? Technology is never the challenge. Yeah. The way we use technology, the way technology is actually bringing more opportunities to people to work differently, to be recognized, is absolutely key in the transformation. We're not trying to see ODA as a standalone thing within Orange. There is simply no such way. I think it is part of our overall global transformation, and I see more and more operations in Orange shifting to agile at scale, where our IT guys are completely embedded into the value trains and the value chains and in the trains together with the business. And it is actually bringing a collective shift in terms of ways of working, ways of identifying value, and seeing how we could deliver the value faster. And in that respect, then ODA is a convenient tool for them to achieve that, and not just yet another transformation on top, which is just exogenous to the business transformation at scale.
Thanks, Thierry. I'm going to call time, I think, there, because I'm aware that we're a little over time for you and for all of our audience. So many, many thanks to our panelists today. We have, I think, unpacked quite a complex subject in an hour. Many more questions to be answered. We'll do our best to follow those up online and perhaps through a further hard talk. So many thanks to our panelists, and thanks to all our audience in many different time zones joining us from all around the world. Whether you're watching live or on replay, thanks for your time. Please do engage with the work of the TM Forum and the work you've heard about today. It is a collaborative industry effort, and you are very welcome to be part of that. With that, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on a future Hard Talk very soon. Thank you.